told that
Good morning, everyone. This is the Committee of Indigenous and Northern Affairs, and pursuant to Standing Order 1082, we are beginning the study on wildfires in First Nation communities. We have right now, it looks like 4 presenters in the first panel from 11 to 12, the Assembly of First Nations and the Saskatchewan First Nation Emergency Management Group or Association, represented by Richard Kent, who I see here. So because you're prompt, you get to go first.
All right.
And let's hope that we have Peter, who I understand is in the building, will be joining us shortly. So it works that you get 10 minutes to present, and then we'll hear from the other presenter if they're here, and then we do a series of questions. And during the process, I'll try and give you signals whether we have 2 minutes left or, you should wrap up. So just once in a while, have a look at the chair and I'll try and help you through the process. So, welcome everything, good morning. The first thing that we do, especially now that we're in a process of truth and reconciliation, is that we recognize that we're actually on unceded Algonquin territory. And it reminds us that we just concluded a study, or we're in the process of a land claim study to look at the relationship between the most important relationship and the first relationship contracts that we made with the first peoples of this nation. So we're on unceded Algonquin territory, and we do that because we're in a process of truth and reconciliation. It's important that we do that. Over to you. You have 10 minutes to present. You don't need to take the whole time, and then we go into perhaps rounds of questions after that, or to the other presenter, which has joined us. Richard, welcome. I'm so glad that you traveled from Saskatchewan, I'm assuming.
Great. Do I need to turn this on? All right. Thank you, Chair and honourable members of the committee. I thank you for inviting me to appear before you today to speak to the very important issue of fire safety and emergency management in our First Nation communities. I am accompanied by Peter A. Beattie, Chief of Peter Ballantyne Cree Nation, Saskatchewan. Before beginning, I'd like to acknowledge that we are meeting on unceded traditional Algonquin territory. I will begin by briefly describing how I've organized my office and its operations to support my mandate of providing emergency preparedness and fire safety training to all of Saskatchewan's First Nation people and communities. My office conducts a range of activities in support of Saskatchewan's First Nation communities. I have organized it into 2 divisions: fire and safety. We provide community training in all aspects of structural and wildland-urban interface firefighting. We provide advanced training in other areas such as auto extrication, water and ice rescue training, confined space, and a multitude of other training depending on the community's needs. We provide fire prevention programs with the communities as well. We perform fire investigations and fire inspections for Head Start and daycare buildings. Emergency and preparedness and response. We provide all aspects of emergency preparedness training to all of Saskatchewan's First Nation communities. We also respond to emergencies in communities when called upon to do so by the elected officials. We set up and help run a community or regional operations center when requested by an elected official. We will provide support and guidance to a community affected by an emergency as well as act in a liaison capacity between the communities and other municipal, provincial, or federal agencies involved in the emergency. Human resources. My office is staffed by a total of 8 positions, one of which is currently vacant at this time. I have 4 staff for fire and safety training and 4 staff for emergency preparedness training and response. The challenges that we have, and I'm going to read from an article by Professor James Waldron of the University of Saskatchewan, who did a study on Wollaston Lake fire and evacuation. The irony is clear. The disaster of which many residents spoke pertains not to the threat of wildfire, but to the efforts to protect them from it. As emergencies continue to become more and more prevalent across Canada within our First Nation communities, we need to ensure that all of our First Nation communities across Canada have the proper training and people put in place to ensure the least amount of disruption to these communities. To do this, we must ensure that sufficient support structures are put into place to manage these emergencies properly. We must also ensure that we understand the effects that chronic disruptions to community life can have on these communities long after repatriation. In my opinion, a support staff of 4 for over 100 communities in Saskatchewan does not meet the requirements to ensure safe community readiness in either fire safety or emergency preparedness. The other challenge is that the funding that is received for staffing levels of 8 is on a year-to-year basis and is obviously not very conducive for qualified staff hiring or retention. In my role as Vice President of the Aboriginal Firefighters Association of Canada, AFAC, we have been leading a project to design and build the National Fire Marshal's Office in collaboration with the Assembly of First Nation leadership and staff, regional First Nation partners, and key allies. Our Tribal Council stands firmly in support of the creation of this office as long as its development is guided by First Nations. We feel that it is very important that this office is designed by us, for us. This office could ensure that proper standards and codes are being met and followed, which in turn would help to ensure adequate standards for our First Nation communities and their levels of preparedness in the emergencies field in the following ways. Remove regional disparity, develop national standards for emergency services within First Nations, provide needed fire prevention focus, support regional and community incident response, build a base of First Nation emergency services expertise, gather incident data to be used to redefine what needs to be changed, enhanced, or supplemented in First Nation emergency services, help to ensure adequate funding to exist compliant emergency services offered by First Nation institutions. In conclusion, I thank the committee again for inviting me to discuss fire safety and emergency management and for the opportunity to ensure that you, as our elected officials, have your questions answered from the boots on the ground emergency officials. This concludes my opening statement, and I would be pleased to answer any questions that you may have for me.
Thank you, Mr. Kent. I think that gives us a lot of time to go to Chief Beattie, if you'd like to speak.
Thank you, Madam Chair and honourable committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today regarding the impacts of the wildfires on our northern communities. The Peter Ballantyne Cree Nation, PBCN, is a large multi-community band located in the province of Saskatchewan and has a population of 10,655 members, 7 distinct northern communities, and 1 community located just outside of Prince Albert. The 7 northern PBCN communities are spread throughout a vast traditional territory of approximately 51,000 square kilometers. During the first week of August 2017, several fires were started due to lightning strikes that were in the vicinity of a number of PBCN communities. Although the fires began as small and manageable, as they grew daily, they came to significantly impact 3 of the PBCN communities. Poor air quality and direct fire threat led to the evacuation of approximately 2,800 PBCN band members. These evacuated members were displaced for approximately 34 days. During wildfire management's actioning of the fires and the efforts to evacuate, shelter, and repatriate community members, there were several significant issues that surfaced that I would like to bring to your attention at this time. These issues fall under the areas of communication, actioning of fires, and funding. Communication. Clarity is needed in the definition and terminology used by wildfire management when describing operations. Differing definitions used throughout the event were confusing and at times misleading. Provincial teleconferences regarding strategy and event management were closed to the PBCN Leadership and Emergency Operations Center, resulting in a question of transparency of operational communications. Actioning of fires. The timeliness of actioning fires with manpower and equipment is a major concern. Impacts to the communities would have been minimized if the original small fires would have been controlled earlier. Instead, major roads, critical infrastructure, and public safety were compromised significantly. Over 185,000 hectares of traditional lands were impacted, and a community of over 3,500 people was threatened and led to the general evacuation of Pelican Narrows. Funding. Wildfires have significant financial and human resource costs to the bands and its agencies. Expectations for these costs to be absorbed by the band are unrealistic based on the current funding, practices, and models. Both health services and the band are mandated to have emergency response plans in place. However, no funding is allocated towards this. During this event, it was clearly apparent that having an emergency response coordinator in place to provide leadership and coordination through a band-led emergency operations center had major benefits for all stakeholders. Unfunded costs associated for community security, local fire suppression, maintaining sustenance and supply chain to essential services remaining in the community. It is essential to have health workers and other community agency staff working with community members at evacuation sites to provide support and continuity of care, and is another unfunded cost. These are only some of the costs associated with community emergencies that are expected to be borne by the band and are not clearly defined in reimbursement models. I am respectfully requesting the federal government to review the attached information package and to consider the following requests related to forest fire management and response. Those requests are: number 1, operational terms be clearly defined along with current fire actioning policies and made available to First Nation stakeholders. 2, during an emergency event affecting a First Nation, it should be deemed standard procedure to have First Nations representation at all provincial/federal meetings where decisions will be made regarding the event management, strategy, or provision of services affecting the First Nation. 3, standard operating procedures or guidelines utilized by wildfire management to define the actioning threshold for a fire need to be reviewed. In our opinion, the fires could have been managed better to minimize the effects on the communities and the large traditional land area. We are requesting a review of the fire suppression efforts of wildfire management by an impartial third party. This should result in improved outcomes in future fires. Number 5, congregate shelters have had ongoing concerns regarding such things as the safety of at-risk populations, maximum length of stay, utilization of traditional foods and activities, to name a few. Where congregate shelters are absolutely necessary, a First Nations committee should be engaged to advise on standardized shelter management policies and procedures. Number 6, the La Ronge 2015 wildfires resulted in INAN giving a verbal indication of funding for the Lac La Ronge Indian Band, LLRIB, Health Emergency Coordinator, ERC, position. This should be extended to include the PBCN Health ERC position as well. Number 7, standard covered services should be clearly defined by INAC/FNIHB. Number 8, INAC and the province should work with First Nations to identify locations within First Nation communities that could serve as alternate shelter locations and support them the same as any other shelter facility. Number 9, permanent clean air shelters should be supported to reduce health risks during times of delayed evacuation, when sheltering in place and/or as a respite during poor air quality due to high smoke levels. Number 10, First Nations should be supported through funding and manpower in the areas earlier identified as funding deficiencies. As stated, the recent wildfires of 2017 have had significant impacts on the PBCN northern communities. 2 reports that document the Lac La Ronge 2015 and the PBCN 2017 wildfires will be completed by March 31st, 2018. These would greatly assist in future planning and policy review. In closing, I would like to express my appreciation for the opportunity to address the Standing Committee, and I look forward to any questions you may have.
Thank you, Chief. We appreciate you taking the time and the extensive travel that you took to get here. Yeah, miigwech. We're going to open up to questioning, and we start with the Liberal side, and we start with MP Ananda Sangri.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you both for joining us this morning. And I want to just start with respect to Peter Ballantyne. I understand there were 2,300 residents were evacuated this past summer. And I'm just wondering if you could kind of elaborate on the type of resources that were required for that evacuation, and also the type, whether you had those resources at your disposal to be able to manage the evacuation to your satisfaction.
Yes, Madam Chair, with regard to the question from the honourable member, the initial part of our evacuation, when we declared the emergency evacuation, we made contact with the province, social services and emergency services as well, letting them know that we needed to get people out of the community. They sent in school buses, and these were for the priority 1 patients. These were the elderly and the small children and so on. And these were school buses that they sent in. And of course, that raised some concerns, which were later addressed when they sent in coach buses, which were a little bit more comfortable. But we had some real concern in sending school buses to the community to haul out our priority 1 patients, which is not a very comfortable ride when it's approximately 4 hours. To Prince Albert or Saskatoon would be 5 hours. So those were the resources that we had in conjunction with some private vehicles that left the community at that time. And when we went to the priority 2 and 3, we had the coaches there to transport those people. But and then the general evacuation, a lot of people took their own vehicles to leave the community. And we didn't have a lot of resources that were provided. Of course, the people that wanted to go out on their own, we had to assist them with their gas that they needed. And I think the lunches were provided when they got to Prince Albert or Saskatoon. And the majority of the evacuees were taken to a congregate shelter in the soccer stadium in Saskatoon. Some were in Prince Albert, and I forget the name of the facility they used there. I don't think it was a congregate. It was mostly hotel rooms that we initially provided for them, and then we contacted the Red Cross, and they took over from there in terms of getting people into hotels in Prince Albert and Saskatoon.
Could you elaborate with respect to the geographical challenges you face? Just because I know you're dealing with a vast area and also a number of different communities. So maybe, Mr. Kent, if you can give us a sense of some of the geographical challenges that exist in the area that you work in.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. In northern Saskatchewan, we have many remote communities. We're in the forest. You know, we're the Saskatchewan 100,000 lakes and forests. So we don't have a whole lot of roads, and the roads we have, there's normally one road in, one road out. These are difficult for us because we had the roads in and out of the communities shut down quite often because the fire was approaching the roads. So we didn't have a large window of opportunity to get people in and out when we needed to, you know, to get people out by air, that many people just wasn't going to happen. So these are conditions that we meet all the time in our forested areas. Not a lot of roads. They're all gravel roads, very few paved roads, and they get shut down by fire. The provincial government will shut roads down due to the fires approaching and the danger to having people travel through those areas. So that's just some of the conditions that we need to look at. And as the chief mentioned, you know, bringing school buses in on a hot day with no washroom facilities on them for priority one people is kind of ridiculous. And I think we need to ensure that the communities have the proper training, that they can start looking after some of these issues on their own before they have to go to outside help to get this. So you know, those are some of the issues that we have.
So just on picking up your last point, what are some of the lessons learned from this summer, and how can we use those lessons for future preparation?
We've had many lessons learned because we've had emergencies in Saskatchewan, you know, due to forest fires, flooding, everything else over the years. But, you know, some of the lessons learned are values at risk that may be identified by the province are not the values at risk that are identified by the First Nation communities. And an example of that would be the values at risk with the province is a structure, a building, or a cabin, or something like that. But when we talk to our chiefs and our elders and the people in the communities, the values at risk are the forests next to the communities, because as some may go out to Safeway to do their shopping, our communities go to the forest to do their shopping. That's where they gather their food and berries and medicines, but it's not looked at as a value at risk in a lot of cases. So that's one lesson. The other lessons that we've learned are there's cultural differences, and we have to ensure that the communities look after their own people. The communities need to tell the emergency staff, whether it's my staff, provincial staff, federal staff, that there are some things that we need to do that is culturally different. And we need to ensure that they have the say in that.
So just for clarification for committee members, can you tell us a little bit about what is a level 1 person, patient? Is this a person with with medical needs on a daily basis? Are they at the health center, or are they independent? Just give us an idea of what you mean by level 1.
Yeah, priority 1 patients are chronic care patients. They could be diabetics that need dialysis services on, 2 or 3 times a week. So these are people that need that service. They have to be taken out of the community. And some of the other ones are chronic heart patients, people with very serious health conditions.
Okay.
Those would be priority 1.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move to the Conservative side. MP Kevin Waugh.
Thank you. It was me that put the names forward. So we've had a lot of fires in our province in the last number of years, and I know we're studying a lot on BC because they had a horrific incidents this year. We had some in Manitoba, and I just thought I would put your names forward, and thank you both for making your way to Ottawa here this morning. Who ordered the school buses? That's the first question.
The province, I'm not sure which agency that would have been, whether it was the Red Cross or the EMO, the Emergency Management Organization. I don't know exactly who made that call, but they sent in the school buses.
And when did they change the school buses to coaches? And who ordered that?
When we had these conference calls with the province, with social services, with wildfire management, and other agencies within the province that we work with in times of emergency, because this isn't the first one that we've been through. And so I forget the question there.
Well, who ordered from the school buses?
Yeah, one of those agencies would have ordered those buses.
Okay.
So it wasn't us. When it changed was when we put that forward to them during one of our conference calls.
Yeah. And you said you were excluded from teleconference calls.
No, these...
Before?
Yeah. They had what they did, the way it was structured was they would have their meetings, whether it was a teleconference amongst themselves or in a meeting like this, face-to-face. Okay. And then after that, they would join into our conference call with them. So they did their strategies and management strategies with the fire and so on within their closed group, I'll use that word, and then they would come on to our conference call after.
Yeah. Just one more question to you. You talked about the insufficient funding for the health equipment and support. So what is the funding that you get for this, and how much more would you think is required for this when you're dealing with this?
In the case of Peter Ballantyne Cree Nation Health Services, the emergency response coordinator, the ERC position, was a funded position through the Prince Albert Grand Council that came from, I believe, FNIHB, First Nations Inuit Health Branch. And so that funding is coming to a close. They funded that position, I believe, at $75,000 a year.
Yeah.
And what we're asking is that we know, as I stated in my opening statements, Madam Chair, that LaRange had been given verbal confirmation that they would be funded through INAC.
Yeah.
And we are asking for the same funding as well. And I would say that if we were funded, it would be at that minimum of $75,000 per year.
I want to thank you for your presentation and your recommendations. Same with you, Mr. Kent. These fires started in August when your staff was, well, they were probably gone by then. Most of your, like, how does that happen? These fires start in August and your staff, they run out in the middle of August. They're gone home. Can you address that, yeah. Mr. I'll go. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to make that a very quick point.
Yeah.
This is it's extremely rare, I think, in Saskatchewan to be having that type of situation where we're into August, where it should be starting to cool off. and things should be starting to cool off, and you wouldn't be expecting forest fires.
I would agree with you.
And just quickly, that spring we had very high water levels, very high.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody was thinking forest fires at all until we hit July, and then we hit these extreme hot temperatures, no rain. And right through August, that's when they started, the beginning of August. I believe they were aware of this August the 5th or August the 8th, some of them started. And we had hot weather, high winds. And
we did.
I don't know, from one extreme to the other.
I know, Mr. Kent, and that's the issue. These fires start and then nothing happens, and then 4 or 5 days later we have a massive blaze. So maybe just talk about that, because the issues are with these bans. They let the people know there's a fire, and then nothing happens for 2 or 3 days, and then we have these catastrophes.
Yes, as the chief has mentioned, you know, we have to be prepared, and we have to make sure that we are ready to stop the fires before they get into the communities and disrupt the life of the community and send people home. So, but in Canada, we have to look. We're having emergencies at all times of the year. You know, the Wollaston evacuation was in May 11th, in 2011. And this one here was in August and September. So yeah, we have to be prepared. We have to have trained people, and we have to let the communities, you know, decide how the emergency is run, because they know what's best for their community.
Can you address that, August? No staff to fight these fires in August?
Yeah, you know, when we're getting ready to shut down the forest fire staff, and that's a staff that's staffed by the provincial government. And some of the firefighters are from our First Nation communities. But, you know, they're shutting down at that time. We don't expect, and we normally don't have those fires. But when we do, we have to make sure we have staff and people that we can call in quickly and stop the fires before they get close to the communities.
Did you do that?
In this case, no, I don't believe we did. We needed to respond. I believe the province needed to respond a little quicker to those fires, and we need to have more staff ready to go within First Nations communities.
Chief Beattie, when you're evacuating up to 2,800 people, I did hear a lot of, am I done? Oh, sorry. Thank you very much.
You got about 8 seconds, so you were just getting on a roll there.
No, that was it.
MP Jolie Bois is next from the NDP.
Thank you very much. Chief Peter Beattie, thank you for coming. I appreciate you being here and giving this overview. And Richard, thank you. I'm a member of Parliament for Northern Saskatchewan. And before I became an MP, I was in municipal politics, and I did the evacuations on the municipal side. And so I'm familiar with what it entails. Last week, we've learned that there is no agreement for the province of Saskatchewan. There's only one province, I believe, in Canada. There's no agreement between Saskatchewan and INAN to look at forest fires in our regions. How can we ensure that the province gets to the table and they sign the agreement and they do their part to ensure that all Indigenous peoples, when they're evacuated, are supported with the evacuations? Both of you, if you can answer.
Oh, you can answer.
Okay. Well, we need agreements. We need agreements in Canada, because eventually all of us need to ask for help, whether it's out, you know, we look after ourselves first, then we go out to the community, then we may go to the province, then we may go federal. So we do need agreements, I agree. But, you know, in some instances, these agreements were being negotiated between the federal government and the province, and we didn't really have any of our First Nation communities involved. And when, you know, it was a couple of years ago when those agreements were getting ready to be signed, our chiefs actually stood up and said, whoa, hold on, we haven't, you know, you're making an agreement that deals with our communities, you need to talk to us. So, you know, and in one case in Saskatchewan, they were looking at funding, you know, $1 million to the province for positions for the province. We need the positions. That's building capacity in the province. That's great, but what about the capacity in the First Nation communities? So that hasn't gone on, and from what we're hearing, they're looking a little differently at that. But you know, that's just it's just a problem that we have to deal with. We do need agreements, but the agreements can say, when we need you, we will call you, and we'll pay you a normal fee for service when we need you. So,
Okay. Chief Peter?
Yeah, I think just in terms of the agreements with the province, we were not aware that there was any kind of discussion going on between the province and the federal government in terms of, you know, the the funding required to facilitate us being able to respond to forest fires. And that's what Mr. Kent was talking to, Madam Chair. And I think that there has to be some effort on both sides, our side and the province and the federal government, to come up with an agreement to facilitate us being able to respond in a timely fashion. If we're involved, we know what we need to get done and how to go about doing that in our way, in our traditional way. And I look forward to that kind of a discussion. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Still further to the province. My experience thus far in evacuations with, be it First Nation, I'm a treaty person from Clearwater River Dene Nation, but I live on the municipality side. Every year we face this, and the province steps in and does what it's supposed to do. But the argument, there's one argument that fails all the time, is the hiring of local residents to fight the fires, be it on the treaty side, the First Nation, or the municipality side. How can we have that discussion move forward?
Madam Chair, with regard to that issue, we did run into that as fresh on in my mind. We did try to get our firefighters, our certified firefighters, they're called level 3 firefighters. Level 1 are the initial attack crews that are funded by the province, very well trained men, mind you. Also the First Nations firefighters, which are the twos, level 2. And then you have the level 3, which are certified firefighters that are trained and certified to fight fires that are within the community. We had a heck of a time trying to get anybody out on the fires. Especially in terms of our own local people that are certified. We couldn't get them out on the fires to do any of that work that was needed to do, because if you're going to put out a fire, you need boots on the ground. Dropping water out from an air tanker or a helicopter bucketing is not going to put a fire out. If any of you have any experience in forest fire fighting, you have to dig it out of the ground. You have to do all of that hard work if you're going to put the fire out. If you want to manage the fire and keep it from, just keep it or direct it around communities, you may well be able to do that with heavy equipment and air tankers and helicopters. But I think that has to be rethought. That part of the firefighting strategy, especially within proximity of populated areas and infrastructure, that has to change, because right now what's happening is that they're managing fires, but you have to look at it in terms of when you action a fire. Their policy, I believe, states that when an infrastructure is in danger, that's when they action the fire. Actioning meaning putting men there and equipment. You can use that same terminology when you're monitoring a fire via satellite monitoring. I mean, we had access to that as well. We knew when those fires started, when they were small and manageable. But there was no action because there was no direct threat to any infrastructure. And then when they did blow up, then they tried to manage it, and it was too late. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Can I quickly, yeah, okay. Thank you.
Questioning moves to MP Harvey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I'm going to start with you, Mr. Kent. During this year's evacuations in Saskatchewan, the Fire Smart program, was utilized as part of that process. Can you comment on the successes with the Fire Start program and some of the possible challenges associated with it as well, or what could be done differently and what is working?
Yes, I can. The person that runs Fire Smart within Prince Albert Grand Council is Cliff Bittner with our forestry. He's in with my department as well. And the Fire Smart program is working extremely well. What it basically does is it clears the fuels around communities and in the forest surrounding communities and makes fire breaks so that it gives the community a chance to survive a wildfire if it gets close to the community. So the program is working real well as giving information to the people in the community at how to make their community fire smart and their homes fire smart. Trim the branches, 8 feet up, and make sure the trees are spaced far enough apart, and clear the ground fuel. So it's a great program. It's been working very well. We've had a lot of success stories with it. And what we're doing is we're actually putting in for, instead of year-to-year funding, we're putting in funding for a 5-year program so we can look into the future and create these safe communities right across Saskatchewan and give the communities a fighting chance.
And has there been, what level of engagement has there been on that program? Like, how broad has the adoption been in Saskatchewan with the Fire Smart program?
We've got a lot of communities done, but we've got a lot of remote communities, so there's a long way to go. But we've been working with INAC's emergency manager, and they've been very supportive of the program. They can see that it's working. We can show that it's working. We've got statistics to prove that it's working. So we're very pleased in what's been happening. But there's a long way to go. We've got a lot of forest, and it does grow back too.
And what are some things that the department could do, in your opinion, to aid in further adoption of that program?
I think what the department can do, and I believe what the department has been doing, is listen to the experts in the field. And that's, the people that are employed with wildfire management and with Prince Albert Grand Council forestry, and we train the wildfire people that the chief was mentioning, type 1, 2, and 3. So listen to what the experts are telling you, and try to follow their guidance.
Okay, thank you. And Chief Beattie, as a community who's experienced wildfires and evacuations, could you summarize some of what you feel would the lessons learned be from that experience? What worked right this year, what went wrong, recognizing that, while there was challenges, not everything went wrong, obviously. So some of the positive outcomes and some of the areas that need improvement.
I'll start with the evacuations. I think obviously we mentioned what was wrong right off the top. But I think one of the things that we appreciated was the communications that we had later on in the process of the evacuations, being able to talk to emergency management officials in the province, and as well we had Indigenous affairs there as well with a representative, and so along with our own emergency operations center personnel that we had set up. We took that initiative because of the experiences from prior in other communities in prior years. We knew the importance of having that emergency operations center staffed by personnel from the Grand Council, and Richard was part of that, and also our own personnel from our own First Nation. The other things learned was that you know, in the terms that we have, that we call the policy of the province, we often say the let it burn policy, although they don't have that on paper. In our view, it's in practice is what that is letting it burn to a point where it becomes a threat, and then you try to action it. And so we learned things like that were, I think, that need to be changed over the next few years. And as I had said in my answer as well, you know, with the extreme conditions that we're running into now year after year in terms of climate change, I think we have to change the thinking, rethink that whole fire management policy and how you manage fires that have the potential of threatening communities or infrastructure like roads. I mean, one of the major arteries into northeast Saskatchewan, going to Creighton and Flin Flon from Prince Albert, was closed for almost the full length.
Just quickly before I run out of time, you know, we've talked a lot about the First Nations themselves and ensuring that the Indigenous people within those communities play a very proactive role in the process all the way through. What do you think some of the most important areas of focus should be in trying to encourage, you know, whether it's through the Aboriginal Firefighters Association or through existing programs, that we increase our level of knowledge and our level of input from the Indigenous people themselves into how these plans go forward?
Yeah, I think it's very important that we become engaged in any of those strategies to address emergencies, whether it's fires or flooding or whatever. But I think it's very important that we become engaged, that we have our input into any kind of a management strategy or in terms of fires, the suppression of those fires. I think that a lot of us in our communities, you know, Peter Ballantyne being such a large area, I think we have a lot of knowledge and experience in dealing with that, including the emergencies, evacuations, and so on. I mean, there's valuable input that anyone can get from our communities if only they would approach us and engage us in that process.
Very good. Questioning now moves to MP Viersen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Madam Chair, I'd just like to give the committee notice of a motion that I'd like to move at some point. Madam Chair, that in the light of the interim report published by the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls on November 1st, 2017, the challenges highlighted by the Commissioners related to the working with the Government of Canada and the Privy Council and the Commissioners' 7 procedurals recommendations, the committee invite the Privy Council office to appear before this committee to respond. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Gary? Oh, sorry, MP and Desangre.
Just a notice.
Just a notice. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for indulging me, guests.
I'm sorry that was a little bit procedural and it was on a different topic. MP Viersen, are you on this topic?
On this topic.
On this topic, go
yeah,
ahead.
Just thank you for indulging me, guests. I got, I guess, 2 areas I would like to go after a little bit. Mr. Kent, you said early on in your presentation that the largest threat comes not from the fire, but from the response to the fire. What would that threat look like? Is that like the loss of life, or could you just flesh out what that threat you were talking about is?
Yeah, and what we're talking about is the social impact on community. When we move people, as the chief was mentioning, priority ones, you know, the patients, the COPD people, get them out, elders, diabetes. We move them out to a center wherever we can. And when I say we, it's the province that sets this up. But then, you know, priority 2 and 3 start move. So we're starting to separate family units now because one area is full. Now we got to fill another. So family units get separated. So we really need to ensure the communities are looking after, because they know which family units should be together. So that's the kind of problems that we're seeing.
And basically getting to the point that in one of these events, if there is a loss of life, it's typically not directly responsible from the fire. It's responsible from one of these other scenarios. Is that what would you agree with that?
Yeah, we're not talking about the loss of life from directly a fire in that quote that I gave.
Okay.
It's that, you know, it really, there is a social impact in the community that in a lot of cases is greater than the impact the actual emergency, the fire is.
Yeah. Mr. Beatty, you talked a little bit about being part of the discussion with the provincial, at the provincial table. One of the issues that we've heard about before is that individuals that live in the communities often don't really have a sense of what is going on, and their only gateway to what is going on is through social media, and a lot of the times that information isn't necessarily good information. What has been your experience with getting that information that you then learn out to your community members?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll answer that question to the honourable member. My experience is that, yes, there is a lot of social media messages that go out there that, you know, tend to differ greatly from what's really happening on the ground. And what we do in those terms is that we, in this instance, we provided information to those evacuees that were in the evacuation centers, in the hotels. We had our personnel go there on a daily basis, giving them the information on how the fires were coming along, and gave them maps and so on to look at as to how the fire was developing, and also giving them information on any services that they may need to access, and also used MBC Radio, which is a Mississippi Broadcasting Corporation in northern Saskatchewan, to get that message out there as well. So those are basically the things that we use to get that message, the correct information to our evacuees.
Thank you.
Questioning moves to MP Zahid.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to both the witnesses for coming out today. So my first question is in regards to the adequate resources. I know like that first step towards ensuring emergency preparedness is to guarantee that a standard and adequate level of resources is available to the communities that are potentially threatened. So across Canada, do you think that the Indigenous reserves have adequate resources on hand for fire protection and damage mitigation?
Well, thank you for the question. No, I don't believe we do at this time. We need to do a lot more training with the communities, and we need to do enough training with the communities that they can run any type of emergency, whether it's a house fire or forest fire or evacuations. We need to ensure that they get the training. They get people trained in information services, because as was mentioned, you know, there's a lot of Facebook and Twitter and everybody saying your house burnt or your cabin burnt. But we need to ensure the communities know how to set up proper lines of communication, how to get it out there, how to run emergencies, where to put people, how to put them in culturally sensitive areas, how to go about dealing with provincial and federal governments. The training is what's needed, and the building of capacity within our communities, that's what's needed. The days should be gone where we say we're declaring a local state of emergency and then we just stand back and let the provincial and federal governments come in and look after. They're perfectly capable of looking after themselves. We need to provide them the tools, the training, to do it, because nobody can look after the community better than their own community.
So is there any minimum standard for the minimum resources required to be available to each community?
I'm sorry.
Like, is there a standard for the minimum resources which are required to be available to each community? Do we have any laid down?
Not really, because we're talking about different emergencies, and in different emergencies you need all sorts of different equipment. And you know, what I like to use instead of a standard list of, I always call it, or we always call it, an adequate list. Let's not meet this certain, you know, basic standard. Let's meet the adequate standard to look after our communities. So really there isn't. We have Provincial Emergencies Act and Fire Acts, but they don't apply to First Nation communities. We don't have, we need, and hopefully through this Fire Marshal's, Indigenous Fire Marshal's office, we can look at creating those Fire Act, Emergencies Act that literally apply to First Nation communities.
And how do we see that whatever the resources are available, how we can educate the communities to make sure that they know in case of a fire, these are the resources available to them, and what is the process they have to go through? Well,
Again, what I think the process would be tied closely to this Indigenous Fire Marshal's office, who would, it's really there to gather a lot of data. So we know we have a lot of equipment within our First Nations. An example, we've got buses within some First Nations that we're offering the chief their use of their coach buses. We've got a lot of equipment within First Nations that we can share within First Nations, but not only within First Nations. We all want to be good neighbors. We want to share it with all of our neighbors, whether they're First Nation or not. We should all be working together. We need to collect that data of what's available and when. So, you know, this is another example of why an office like that's needed, to get all the data and information housed in one area so that we have one place to go to find out what's available.
Chief Betty, would you like to add to this?
Yes, if I could, Madam Chair. The resources that are needed in each of our communities, especially the ones with road access, and I talk about structural fires as opposed to the forest fires. I'll start with the structural fires, where basically what you would need is a fire hall and a fire truck, as well as the personnel trained and the proper equipment to address a structural fire, a house fire. And so we didn't have that in our major community in Pelican Narrows. And so the community took on their own, as their own initiative, they put together money to purchase a fire truck, and then I believe worked with Indigenous and Northern Affairs in trying to acquire a fire hall that they're in the process of doing. And this was after we lost a number of young people to house fires, children. We didn't have the proper equipment. We didn't have a fire truck. We had nothing other than the fire hydrants because there was a water system in place. And so there's really no trained either volunteer or paid firefighters. And another community is going along the same lines, and this one is the community of South End Reindeer Lake, which is 222 kilometers north of Lac La Ronge on the south end of Reindeer Lake. Thankfully they've been able to get funding for a fire hall, a small fire hall, and then they're in the process of getting a fire truck as well, and getting firefighters, structural firefighters, trained to use that equipment properly and to be able to respond. You know, in terms of our reserve communities where we live on reserve, we have the First Nations firefighters that are funded by the province, but they only react to fires when they're allowed to by the province. They're not really under the direct control of the local leaders. So I think that's something that we need to work on as well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much for your presentations. It was very informative, especially from a chief comes from a community with people evacuated last year. Thank you again, Miigwech, for coming out. We'll suspend the meeting for a couple minutes and then come back for the next panelists. Thank you. I'd ask members to reconvene quickly so that we can get a robust discussion from our panelists who are representing the Aboriginal Firefighters Association of Canada and the First Nations Emergency Services Society. So both groups will have 10 minutes, up to 10 minutes to present. Then after that, we'll go into a series of questions from the MPs. So it's up to you. Who wishes to start? Okay, so it's up to the Firefighters Association, I gather? Okay. Blaine Wiggins, Executive Director. Go ahead, Blaine.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having us. Again, I'd like to acknowledge the unceded territory of the Algonquin people. My name is Blaine Wiggins. I am a Tyendinaga Mohawk from the Bay of Quinte. I'm also the Executive Director for the Aboriginal Firefighters Association of Canada. I live in a small community just north of Williams Lake, BC, so had some first-hand experience as a community member, as a volunteer firefighter, as a professional emergency service practitioner, and as an evacuee during the fire season. I'd like to introduce our president, Arnold Lazar.
Watkawanu Waradu. Greetings in Mohawk. My name is Arnold Lazar, Mohawk from Ganawage. I'm currently the Director of Public Safety for the Mohawk Council of Ganawage, and I'm also president of the Aboriginal Firefighters Association. I'd like to thank Madam Chair and the honourable members for having us today. As Blaine mentioned, he's experienced evacuation, so I'll turn it back over to him.
Thank you, Arnold. So we often get asked, especially after events, what is the problem? What's the main concern? What are the challenges within First Nations community and the fire service and emergency services? The problem with the question is that there's the expectation it's a simple question and it's a simple answer, and the reality is nobody wants to listen occasionally to the long answer. One of the main components that we've been focusing on, several years ago we sat down as a national organization, representation from emergency services across Canada, and the one thing that we asked ourselves, would more resources resolve the issues that we're dealing with? And we came to the quick conclusion that no amount of resources, if we don't change the way we're doing things, and when I say we, I mean all of us, First Nations communities, federal governments, provincial governments, we're not going to have any different outcomes than we're already having. And I think, since we actually had that discussion several years ago, although we have been working very hard to educate and bring awareness and bring a strategy, I think the reality is our outcomes have not changed dramatically. So I know we have a very short amount of time, so I won't get into detail, but just some of the issues that we identified as problems is, disparity of resources from region to region. We have regions, we have not regions. We've got a lack of data collection. Data collection isn't just about collecting information, it's about deciding what we need to do and how we need to respond to that, which is a fundamental aspect to fire prevention, fire safety for any community. We have no established coordination of fire services, albeit there are established forestry coordination, and some of that does involve First Nations fire crews. What is left out is municipal fire services, and specifically First Nations fire services. Each province has fire protection legislation. Our First Nations communities are not afforded any type of fire protection legislation, which includes linkages to building codes and fire life safety codes. But it's also important to note that although we do need, this is a strong pillar that supports protecting our communities and protecting our citizens, any type of legislation needs to be designed by First Nations and for First Nations. So we've actively and are in progress of engaging the Assembly of First Nations and the National Housing Infrastructure Chiefs to seek support and mandate to address this specific gap, amongst others. So very quickly, I indicated we sat down several years ago and we defined and focused on 4 specific areas that we feel would address many of the issues in First Nations communities related to fire and fire safety. Fire prevention is the biggest one. Again, I could spend hours talking about just this one issue. There's a lack of fire prevention and a focus on fire prevention. I spoke briefly about legislative standards. Legislative standards alone aren't just the answer. It's the ability for First Nations communities to have the resources and the capacity to utilize those standards. Fire service operations, again, we have no standards across Canada or even within regions when it comes to basic things like training, equipment. We don't do environmental scans. We don't have robust fire protection programs. We don't have community infrastructure support. We have challenges with volunteerism. The majority of First Nations communities and First Nations fire service is based on volunteers. We have very, very few paid fire services in First Nations communities. And again, this is just some very small examples. And the last area that we're focusing on is national coordination of Aboriginal fire services. So we haven't rested on our laurels and came up with a great idea. We've been working very hard. As an example, we continually have discussions and gain support and seek and share information back with our other national partners, including the Canadian Association of Fire Chiefs, Canadian Volunteer Firefighters Association, Canadian Council on Fire Marshal and Fire Commissioners, Canadian Fallen Firefighters, National Association of Fire Protection Association, just to name an example of a couple of groups that we work proactively with. Other areas for national coordination also include emergency medical services. Many of our First Nations communities are located a long way from higher care medical, and there's a gap there just even on who's coordinating and offering emergency medical services. And I won't repeat some of our previous witnesses, but the issue around emergency management is a very, very big issue. So again, just speaking really quickly on, I don't want to take up all of my colleagues' times. So some of the issues that we saw this summer, a lack of response to First Nations communities within British Columbia, where I'm based. Some of the fire departments were not permitted to protect their own fire departments, including First Nations fire departments, while doing their best effort to enforce and protect evacuated zones. Both police and military impeded fire and health and safety services. And while the fires are over, we still have the impacts post-event. And, there's some major gaps, not just during the event, but during pre-planning. And this is where this is one of the things that really can go wrong. Just the inability to do a pre-plan. Once the fire or an incident's in play, we can see some catastrophic events. We're very fortunate that we haven't seen them here in Canada yet, and I emphasize the yet. But all of our focus has to be around, and again, I'm repeating some of my colleagues, is around building capacity within First Nations. If I can very quickly share a story, I was the former executive director for the First Nations Emergency Services, so I've gotten to know my colleagues here very well. In 2009, I was invited to Australia to work with the federal government to basically showcase how we, as an Aboriginal organization, work with federal governments, provincial governments to improve emergency management within First Nations communities. Unfortunately, I arrived early February in 2007, or 2009, my apologies, during the fires, the catastrophic fires we had. So I was able to see firsthand how not having this capacity in place can have devastating impacts, and we saw that just recently in California. We're seeing a much different environment now, much different fire behavior now. And if I can just leave off, while the fires are over, the post-event of those fires, the psychosocial impacts, the economic impacts, the health impacts, and the ongoing impacts, the ability to gather traditional foods and hunting is ongoing. And again, I live this firsthand every day where I live. So just turn it over to my colleague for any final comments.
AFAC has been advocating since 1992, and we are very pleased that the government has announced last February the implementation of Indigenous Fire Marshal's Office. I'm not going to read the pamphlet to you, but it explains our goals and the bottom line, or at the end of the day, our intention is to create capacity within First Nation communities. We're not in the business of getting in the business, we're in the business of getting ourselves out. My home community is a half community, so we have some good examples of what to do. We're partnering up with many agencies, as Blaine has mentioned, to look at what worked and what didn't work. And we're confident that with this, everybody working, we're going to affect positive change. But more importantly, by building capacity within, the communities will be better served by themselves, for themselves.
Excellent. I'm going to move over to the next presenters, and you have 10 minutes to present, and then we'll get into questioning. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and the honourable members of the committee and the host nation of the Algonquins. My name is Jeff Eustache. I'm a registered forest technologist with First Nations Emergency Services. I'm also the manager of the Forest Field Management Department, and give my regrets for our Executive Director, Brent Langlois, who cannot attend today. And I'll just turn it over to Curtis for introduction as well.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for being here and allowing me to be here. My name is Curtis Dick. I'm a fire service officer with Finesse. Thanks.
So I'll just give you a quick overview of what we witnessed for the 2017 wildfires. They came about very quickly this past summer in BC. In May and June, we had a very unusual wet weather event that created much flooding through the interior of BC. And that's when the emergency response kicked in for many First Nations as well. And that was quickly followed by a very dry, unusual weather event for the rest of June that resulted in severe wildfire risk. And on July 7th, fires ignited in the Kamloops and the Caribou regions of BC. And it caught everybody a bit off guard, I believe. They just happened so quickly and fast that it created significant impacts to the communities in both those areas, First Nations and non-First Nations alike. I'll just give you a quick snapshot of what Finesse is. We're a non-profit society in interior BC, managed by a First Nations Board of Directors. We offer structural, wildfire prevention, fuel management services, emergency management, response, recovery, and planning. We're just getting into that again this year. And we do critical stress incident counseling through a contract with the First Nations Health Authority. We also provide training, education, and awareness in areas of wildfire suppression, governance, and leadership. So the current situation in BC in regards to emergency management, wildfire prevention, and suppression in First Nations. Over the last few years, the province of BC and the federal government and Indigenous Northern Affairs Canada have been working on an agreement for the province through Emergency Management BC to look after emergency response planning on federal lands for First Nations in BC. Our First Nations Leadership Council, which is comprised of the Assembly of First Nations, BC Region, First Nations Summit, and the Union of BC Indian Chiefs, have been working diligently with First Nations communities, Finesse, and other organizations for the implementation of that agreement. It's quite a significant agreement where the three parties would actively engage in the response in regards to emergency management planning. And also the province of BC, through the BC Wildfire Service and Indigenous Northern Affairs Canada, have an agreement where BC Wildfire Service provides fire suppression on First Nations lands in the event of wildfires. In summary, that the events that occurred this past wildfire season occurred so quickly that the ability to effectively respond with current agreements noted above created both issues for the provincial and federal government and First Nations agencies. There were significant structural losses to First Nations homes and assets. Wildfire suppression emergency management response efforts were also tested and many issues resulted. There are provincial and federal reviews occurring and planned over the winter and spring of 2017-18 for prevention, suppression, and emergency response. It is very clear that the First Nations organizations, First Nations Leadership Council, FINESS, and First Nations communities need to be engaged and involved at all levels to ensure that the First Nations communities and organizations have direct and meaningful involvement in planning, decision-making, and resource for effective engagement to ensure that these agreements work effectively in future years. There are various documents from the First Nations Leadership Council that we can make available to the committee in regards to resolutions that our leadership has passed over the years to ensure that effective engagement occurs with the provincial and federal governments. So many of the presentations early by the chief and other presenters this morning kind of were similar to what happened in BC. Basically, the events occurred so quickly, I think it was difficult for those agreements to be implemented effectively. Some of the communities had a bit of difficulty engaging with Emergency Management BC on the implementation of that response and recovery. And it kind of provided some issues for the First Nations to get access to those resources through EMBC and the federal government. I have to admit that they did do very well, the First Nations, with some of those challenges. There were also challenges around the suppression agreement. We had First Nations communities that have the training capacity and ability to respond to wildfires. Unfortunately, because they're not engaged in that agreement with the province and the federal government, they had the inability to get suppression crews directly onto their doorsteps to fight those fires. Many of the First Nations communities declined the evacuation orders and they stayed behind to fight those wildfires. And I think if they did not make that decision, there would have been greater losses to their First Nations communities. So they do have that ability to fight the fires. What they don't have is the ability to actively engage on those agreements. And also with the agreement with the EMBC for emergency response and planning, I think we need to do a little bit more work in that area so the First Nations communities are available to implement those agreements before they happen in terms of the pre-planning, preparation. A lot of First Nations communities in BC don't have resources when it comes to emergency management. They have a lot of emergency management plans, but when you don't have the resources to implement them or work them, you're basically taking them off the shelf during an event. So there was a lot of things that occurred to the province, and there's going to be many reviews over the next few months and into the spring, and in regards to what occurred. And again, we suggest that the First Nations are actively involved in all those reviews at the local, community, regional, provincial level to ensure that First Nations are well prepped, involved in decision making, how these resources are deployed for future events, and the preparation is there for our First Nations communities. We have the organizations, the capacity and the resources in the First Nations communities, whether it's wildfire suppression, structural fire protection. We just don't have the ability to have them deployed immediately. So we'd like to see some of that occur in the future. I want to read off a reference that one of our staff members gave me in terms of recommendations. First Nations communities need to change from, and I don't think the wording is to change, I think the process has to change from victims that are protected into resources that are utilized, so that we can effectively utilize our communities and resources that we have there. We've gone through many years of training, capacity, skill development over the years. I think we just need that opportunity to have those crews implement that training on the ground when these events occur. So I think those are some of the biggest points that I'd like to make today, and I'm not sure if Curtis, if you had anything more to add.
Sure, thank you, honorable members. And I'd just like to add a couple of things. First of all, I want to build on the resource capacity of our community members. As fire chiefs in communities, we're often billed as the go-to person during an emergency. And whether that's emergency coordinator, fire chief, not only that, you're also the maintenance director, you're also the housing supervisor, wearing many different hats as one person. And so that's not always at the forefront of their job description. It's at the side of their desk saying, I'll have to get to it. We're being very reactive as opposed to proactive. And, you know, I don't want to talk about everything that these guys have already mentioned and, you know, sort of beat it to death, but more importantly, we have to recognize the capacity within First Nations communities. I recently went to an emergency coordinate conference in Vancouver, and I read one of the opening statements was that despite teaching First Nations communities, despite having taught First Nations communities, we have a lot to teach as well too. We need people to come and actually see what we're capable of doing. You know, we don't have all the toys that, you know, many municipalities have. We don't have the ladder trucks. We don't have all those stuff. But more importantly, we have human resources. We have local knowledge. We know exactly where the fires are going to burn from, when the winds change, what the water conditions are like. We have all that local history that we have that is not documented in these plans. And we need to be active. We need to be active partners in this rather than just people, like Jeff said. We don't want to be the victims. We want to be the resources in the communities. We're able to help as well, too, is what I'm saying. Thank you.
Thank you. Questioning now begins with MP Bossio.
Thank you, Chair, and thank all of you so much for being here today. I actually had the great honor of meeting Mr. Wiggins and Lazar and Mr. Kent earlier this spring, and we were discussing this very topic around fire safety, and I thank all of you for being here today to provide further information and to help educate all of us on the importance of a fire marshal in particular. And I guess, you know, I'd like to start off with that. Chair, if you could let me know when I have 1 minute, though, because there's another question I'd like to ask on the emergency front. What void do you see the fire marshal being able to fulfill within Indigenous communities?
Probably one of the biggest voids that will be filled is addressing inconsistency and bringing consistency to issues like public education. Many of our First Nations communities have no public education, fire prevention. If we talk about emergency management, one of the capacities there is supporting, while it's not been really flushed out, I believe there's an opportunity for an Indigenous Fire Marshal's Office to support both regional organizations and communities. And if I can use an example, from region to region to region, I know my esteemed colleague, Mr. Kent, talked extensively about Saskatchewan. They've got a fantastic program for emergency management there. In BC, if I draw back on my experience in 2009, when I returned from Australia, we had a catastrophic fire season in BC. Finesse at the time had a very robust emergency management division that supported First Nations communities, both the communities that had high capacity, the communities that had low capacity, so we could bring consistency. And I believe during that fire season, over 50 Finesse personnel were deployed to various fires, both in the Williams Lake area, the Chilcotin area, the Lillooet area, and they were there not to do things, but to work with the communities and address the small gaps. And I'll utilize an example. Because we had fire behavioralists, they were able to insert, that's all the community needed was just somebody to help them do some pre-planning around fire behavior. They could do the rest, emergency social services. They had a emergency plan in place. Then we move ahead a couple of years, and the minister unfortunately decided, or the regional director general, my apologies, BC decided to disband that program and eliminate the funding. And now it's basically off the side of, and these are very, very knowledgeable people. I've had the opportunity to work with them in the field, work with them this summer in emergency centers in the communities. But when you're doing stuff off the side of your desk, trying to help communities help themselves, it doesn't lead itself to consistency. And again, our organization isn't about building an empire, it's about building capacity within communities. And just to note, AFAC is basically the regional organization. So Finesse is a member of AFAC. Prince Albert Grand Council is a member of AFAC. We're an organization of organizations. And it's about building consistency.
Is it also not the fact, though, as you mentioned in your speech, there is no fire protection legislation for First Nations communities?
No.
There is no fire marshal for First Nations communities, and
No.
the provincial fire marshals have no jurisdiction within First Nations communities.
No, and nor is there, as an example, in the province of BC, there's an Emergency Management Act that requires capacity within non-First Nations communities. When a First Nation community signs a modern era treaty, then they are required to engage in that. But for the majority of First Nations communities, and again, like we have to understand that there are have and have-nots. You know, there are communities dependent on INAC funding, and there's communities that have been able to develop a local economy. Majority of our First Nations communities live in rural, remote places where we're developing a local economy, developing local taxation, developing local capacities. Albeit there's some fantastic, and I really articulate and echo the sentiments. The traditional knowledges, when I was deployed to Terrace during the 2007 floods, I went from community to community to draw on traditional knowledge about floods. And that actually helped our response from the federal government, who I was working with at the time, and Emergency Management BC to develop responses.
Sorry to cut you off, but you know, that means that there's no one that's working on building codes, no one that's working on fire prevention, as you'd already mentioned, on education. There are so many different facets that the fire marshal's office will cover to offer, as you had mentioned as well, you know, consistent processes and legislative framework for across the country, and can play a pivotal role so that you don't have the disparities that exist from one region to another.
Yes, yeah, and the major difference between emergency management and fire is around behavior and infrastructure. Emergency management is around capacity and pre-planning and expectation and knowing what to do when the time comes, not trying to figure it out as it's happening.
So I see I've got a minute left, so I wanted to, and you just segued perfectly into the emergency side, because given, you hit on a really perfect point, given that the climate change is happening and these extreme weather events are going to become more and more frequent, the 1 in 100-year storms are now happening every 3 to 5 years, it becomes imperative that not only are we prepared and that we work with Indigenous communities in order for Indigenous communities to define what is best going to protect their communities, but also utilizing the Indigenous knowledge, the historical, as we call the institutional knowledge within government, within the communities, in order to even better define how we can best protect Indigenous communities.
Yes. Yeah, at the end of the day, the win is when First Nations can do for themselves. And say, as articulated, nobody coming to help ourselves.
Not only help yourselves, but even help educate us, because it's not just Indigenous communities that are being affected as well, right, in a lot of these remote areas.
I think that's where it's very important that the First Nations organizations and communities are actively involved in the reviews that are going on in BC and planning for future years on prevention and emergency management.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Questioning goes to MP McLeod.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the witnesses for not only being here today, but for the really important work that you do every day. I'm from Kamloops, British Columbia, and I certainly remember hopping on a flight. I was coming back to Ottawa on the morning of July 7th, and life was calm. And I arrived here, and it was all of a sudden a very difficult challenge that we had facing us, and I don't think we could breathe a sigh of relief until the Labor Day weekend in terms of the actual acute crisis that we were facing, and as indicated, still have some post issues to deal with. My first question, and I'll give it to both people, sometimes is a pretty good consensus around the National Indigenous Fire Marshal Office? Would you say that in Indigenous communities across this country, that is a well-supported concept. And the second part of that question is, would that be sort of step one, and step two, a priority be legislation?
I would say yes, there is a consensus that fire marshal's office is beneficial. We're currently in the consultation stage. We've done studies to look at the fire programs, and the initialization of a fire marshal's office it keeps reoccurring. Once again, by looking at getting consistency across the country, the standard is going to be created. And once we move along, then as we move along, the other agencies will see the benefit, and we're confident that it will roll much faster in terms of consistency and buy-in. We really, once again, it's important to get the buy-in of the chiefs, and we need to change the outlook.
And I think one of the challenges that we're working on right now, we've identified it, and it has come up. We did our first presentation to the Assembly First Nations National Housing and Infrastructure Chiefs Committee in Montreal last week. And the number one thing comes up is funding, and the protection of funding. And I know Brent Langlois, my colleague from Finesse, the executive director, I mean, his number one job is to maintain funding, ensure the programs and services aren't cut. That's one of the things that we actually need to do, is go out there and make sure that as part of our mandate to create a new organization, is we're not stealing any funding. And for decades now, it's been a limited pot, and whenever you come up with something new, that's the number one concern, is, well, where it's going to come from and who's going to lose. And we certainly have, in our discussions with the minister's office and the minister's staff, is that our mandate is we're not going to steal anybody else's funding, and we won't offset. We will be collaborating with regional organizations. They've done some fantastic work, and if anything, we can take advantage. The number one goal of the office, again, is to not have to have an executive director in any region that's got an existing emergency services organization that's doing good work, worry about whether they can do that good work next year. And again, as a former executive director that had to go through, when the switches were cut off, I mean, it was impacts to the community. One of our biggest challenges in emergency services is there is not a lot of professional First Nations practitioners out there, whether it be fire, whether it be emergency management, public safety. There are very few jobs. And the few jobs and the few trained people we can get are easily stolen by mainstream. We recognize that even if we can create a structure and organization that is adequately funded, not well, just adequately funded, we can't compete with mainstream fire. It is one of the best paid employment services one can get into now. And we know this is going to be a constant challenge, but we're up to the challenge of because we're all getting old. We got to train the next generation.
I have a couple more questions, so I do. A quick, Jeff, have you got anything to add to that? Would you say there's good, Curtis?
I just wanted to share a couple things in regards to what Blaine's talking about. Is that I do fire protection governance workshops with chief and councils, and not having, it's really tough to say that there's no standards that are practices that we actually follow in regards to fire protection in the community, especially with fire protection governance. And it'd be nice to see this actual standard put in place for a lot of First Nations, whether it's region to region. It's going to differ a little bit because what applies on the West Coast may not apply here in Ottawa. So it's going to be really interesting to see, to look at. This will benefit a lot of First Nations communities. That way they have a base level that they're going to have fire protection coverage, period.
Great. My next is the wildfire response. I know we heard a little bit in terms of some community members being very reluctant to leave their communities. we heard about the knowledge. I also heard that from the cattlemen in terms of, you know, we know our land, we want to stay and protect, we don't want to be evacuated. I understand Australia actually has a very good program. So you talked a little bit about what didn't work well in Australia, but I understand that they actually have a sort of a certification program where whether it be ranchers or whether it be communities can have a basic level of training and be certified, and then there's a greater comfort level with community members staying in their community. Are you aware of anything there? I know the cattlemen talked about that.
Sorry, I didn't catch the first part, but I believe you're talking about standards and training standards.
Apparently there's a program in Australia where they're not typically people that are on the front lines of fires, but whether it's the cattlemen or people in communities, where they train them to a very basic level, and then when evacuation orders happen.
So, and I'll just use an example. Like the way the system works in Australia is they basically, if it's a city, they run themselves. Outside of the city, it's the state fire services. Whether it's an Aboriginal community or an incorporated, unincorporated community, it's the state fire service that runs it. It's a field of dreams concept. You know, you will build it, you come. You know, so the state runs the fire service there. They do all the training standards. So if we had that equivalent system here, where a province ran the fire service, you know, and any First Nation community said we wanted a fire department or a non-First Nation community, the province would then come in, provide the equipment, provide the infrastructure, provide the training, and it's a set standard. When they said, and I'll just use an example, one of the states, they said they were having a problem with volunteerism in fire service. I asked what their numbers were, and they said it was about 300,000. And I thought that was incredible. Your country's got 300,000. I said, no, this state has 300,000. We don't have 200,000 or approximately 200,000 volunteer firefighters in the country. So they're doing a much better job at running, but they do it statewide, and it's not, the funding isn't an issue. It's not a fight. It's not a jurisdictional issue. There's one standard.
Thank you very much. We need to move on and give MP Blaney, welcome to our committee, a chance to ask you some questions.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for being here and sharing that important information with us today. I just first want to start off by saying, you know, you talked about you cannot compete with mainstream. We just want to be paid adequately, not well. And I was just thinking how many groups of people would say something like that. I hope to see that definitely be reviewed and changed. But you also talked today about a lack of standard equipment and regional disparity. So we know that in many areas there are limited infrastructure amenities for firefighters. We have heard of communities without fire trucks or even access to water. Could you tell us what infrastructure concerns you face regularly and what your top 3 priorities that you have from the federal government?
In terms of the top goal is fire prevention. Even in the best served community, if the occupants of a house or apartment don't know what to do, you're going to have fire deaths. Now, in First Nations communities, coupled with housing issues, so when there's a fire, the death rate is higher. One big goal is to ensure that every community has a fire prevention champion. Doesn't necessarily have to be a firefighter. We use a lot of times the schools, but making sure that the children of the community are aware. I often refer to a small community 2 hours north of us. They had a fire. The child hid in the closet, and unfortunately succumbed to the smoke. And the fire department went out and bought a $15,000 thermal imaging camera. It's a very nice piece of equipment, but it would not save lives. We suggested that he take $500 and hire somebody for a week to make sure that there's a full fire prevention program in the school so that the kids would know not to hide. These are concrete items that we look at and we advocate for.
Anybody else want to add?
I also want to add to that is that as part of our training and education to First Nations communities, that our organization handed out in BC over 26,000 smoke alarms and also fire extinguishers as well too. And we reiterate that you don't have to have a fire department to have a community champion. And that community champion has that education to provide to the rest of the community on an ongoing basis, where we follow up on a monthly or bi-monthly basis. We follow up with them to make sure that they're implementing these programs that we went and educated and taught these people to spread throughout their community. So, and it's also with the schools as well too. And whether you're a fire department or not, we provide the same education to everybody. So,
thank you. So in this committee, there's a lot of talk about the right to free, prior, and informed consent regarding issues that impact Indigenous communities. Could you tell us about the engagement process between different levels of government and Indigenous people in terms of creating management, prevention, and recovery plans?
The first reference I made to the Leadership Council, the First Nations in BC are actively involved in the recommendations that come through that. So we are in the process through Finesse and the First Nations Leadership Council and the Emergency Management BC, and are actively working towards some of those recommendations of engagement with First Nations. It could be a little bit stronger on the prevention and wildfire suppression end of things, but I know Finesse is actively working with our First Nations Leadership Council to ensure that those recommendations are implemented.
Thank you. I'm also aware that some communities have people called land managers, rangers, and keepers, and you talked about the multiple roles that you play in your community, and many communities have people doing that work and how often it's put to the side of the desk. Could you just tell us a little bit about what resources are needed so that all those issues don't get put to the side of the desk all the time?
About the resources needed? Is that what you said?
Yeah, what resources you need so that...
Well, first of all, depending on the size of the community, obviously, whether they got somebody with the passion to do it, identifying that champion and building from there. Once you find that champion in the community, there's other people start stepping forward. You lead by example within the community, and you find that champion to build that, whether it's a fire department or whether it's wildfire services in your community. And there's the capacity building right there. Once you've identified and endorsed them by the chief and council and by an organization, you get all the support you need and you build from there. So, I think it's just identifying those people, and our organization has been fortunate enough to know those, where the boots on the ground organization is able to identify those people. So.
And there was a lot of talk from both of you about design by First Nations for First Nations, and I'm just wondering, do you have any best or promising practices that you've seen in different communities that we could celebrate and share today?
Yeah, and it would be remiss of us to say that not all First Nations have a challenge with capacity. There's many good examples in BC that have very robust, again, fire service. And I think that is the challenge that we deal with, is that the fire service, the evolution of the fire service, we had First Nations really push, our leaders, some of those, sit on boards now and do that leadership role in the 70s and 80s, pushed for funding for fire service, because even then it wasn't a part of federal funding. So we had communities that didn't know a lot about fire services, and the federal government that didn't know a lot about fire service. So the ending result was about 30 years of focus on just fire suppression, not the rest of the fire service. Fire suppression accounts for about 2% of the fire service. The times of what firefighters go and do, fight fires, 2%. 98%, it's around safe buildings, it's around public education, it's fire prevention, it's building inspections, pre-plan examinations. So it's we're playing catch up, and that's really what we need to do. Is when we talk about standards, it's around standards for the fire service. And again, it's about building on the capacity that exists regionally and within the communities. There's plenty of, and as Curtis articulated, we don't necessarily need fire departments in each community. What we need is fire risk management, fire plans, good prevention. That's what saves lives, especially in rural remote, regardless First Nations, non-First Nations. If you don't prevent fires, a rural fire department very rarely gets to save a life or a building.
Thank you. Questioning now moves to MP Amos.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to our witnesses. This really has been, as Mr. Bossio said, an education today. I was particularly taken with the testimony around the incredible value that traditional knowledge can add to firefighting techniques across the country. And I'd like to offer you the opportunity to expand on those remarks, because I think that Canadians in general have a lot more to appreciate about just what kind of generation after generation of knowledge passed down, that isn't just about an immediate environment. It's about an entire landscape, and it's about hundreds of kilometers. How would you characterize the opportunities for firefighting services across the country to learn from Indigenous firefighting knowledge?
Yeah, I want to speak from the fire perspective, as the chief did earlier in the earlier presentation. There's a lot of knowledge around fire and fire behavior, how fire reacts to certain conditions. And a lot of the First Nations have a lot of that knowledge of when the fire is coming, based on their local knowledge of how that fire is going to behave and react to certain weather events and topography. So they have a lot of knowledge how to do that, how to react to that, and when's the right time, like the chief mentioned earlier, to respond to that fire. So there's a lot of that fire behavior knowledge, how to suppress fires, how to work with fires, even around prescribed burning. There has been a lot of prescribed burning in BC over the last 60 years or more, and that resulted in probably a lot of the problems we're having today with the fires intensity, the way the forest had overgrown in certain areas in the province. So First Nations used to burn regularly, and we haven't had that ability to do that for quite some time. And so prescribed burning, prevention, suppression, there's a lot of knowledge in our communities that we can work with. Even responding to the emergency side of it, there are a lot of cultural type perspectives that need to be incorporated into emergency response and planning. There was a lot of issues with taking people out, but there are a lot of cultural things that go behind how people react to leaving the community. So those are the ideas that I have around traditional knowledge.
Okay. Go ahead, please.
If I may, I just want to share a quick story about, I was in northern BC last year, and the community I went to, they talked about wildfires. There was this old guy that actually sat in his field, and he went and lit it on fire. And I guess he had quite a big field, but as he let it burn, Minister Forestry showed up, their land firefighters showed up, and they're getting all nervous. He says, "You know your field's on fire?" He says, "Yes, I do." He's sitting there having his sandwich, and as he sat there and had his sandwich, these guys are making a plan to attack the fire. We're going to build a guard over there. He said, "Just leave it, it'll be okay." Very calmly. And what he did was that he's been doing this for probably 30, 40 years, but because the Ministry of Wildland Firefighters didn't come and introduce themselves, say, "Hey, what have you been doing to protect your property while it's still standing here?" It's the lack of communication that's happening. The stuff that he's, like Jeff's been talking about, the wildland burning that's been happening for years. How many communities do we know that are actually doing that? We've got to step outside the box and say, let's introduce ourselves to our neighbors. Let's not wait until an event happens. So, thank you.
And just very quickly to add, I think we have to look historically. Many First Nations communities, where they are now is not where they were. It's where they were put. And they put themselves in the right places, in safe places. And in many cases, where they were put now has put them in harm's way. So and of course through federal policies, we have to admit we have lost a lot of our history, some of our culture, some of our languages, and so some of that traditional knowledge has been lost. But many of it, especially you get into rural environments, it's just about being willing to ask and being willing to listen. Because there's so much that can be learned before and during events from First Nations communities.
Thank you for that. I represent a riding that has 41 municipalities and two First Nations reserves. So a lot of volunteer firefighters all across the region known as the Pontiac, which is, as we've mentioned, today's Algonquin territory. I wonder, what could what could a fire marshal institution working, I would presume, in collaboration with all of the different provinces, what could it bring to remote, non-Indigenous communities in terms of additional protection? Because I've got a feeling that there are a lot of rural communities across the country, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, who who would like to see greater coordination across the country. And I wonder if you could speak to that.
There are a few First Nation fire departments that protect non-Native communities. That they do exist. With AFAC, we're inclusive. There's a lot of idioms saying, is it First Nation, Indigenous, Native? We always take the inclusive stand. We're looking at the Tapestariat, the Métis, the Inuit. We're not limiting ourselves to one nation, or we're saying by providing good training, good education, we're helping the community, which is may be Native, which may not be Native. But we do know that by building capacity anywhere, we're increasing fire protective services.
And from a programs and services level, quite simply is if that rural First Nations, they will know, in collaboration, with our partner here at the regional level, they'll know they're going to get the same level of services being where they are, and they're going to know that this organization isn't going to have to fight for those services, that there's a guarantee of the services.
Thank you.
But most importantly, they'll know that the services that are coming to them have been designed by First Nations and are being delivered by First Nations, not based on what budget is available. And that's probably the most critical component, is that we can meet the needs of that community.
Thank you. All right. MP INAN Desangri.
I realize that we're out of time, but just wanted to see, with respect to Thursday's witnesses, whether we have.
So I did pass a note saying that we seem to only have 2 people coming on Thursday. So I think the clerk is actively trying to find some, but I put forward a suggestion of perhaps a Manitoba presenter that might be available.
So there's a suggestion that we have Judy Clayson from Manitoba. If there is space.
If there's
for another
agreement,
witness.
we could see if she would be available. She was active in the fire providing services. MP MacLeod?
So, Madam Chair, I have no objection. I mean, obviously, it's important to have as full panels as we can. I would just, if there is a list, and I would presume the clerk, this would be a backup plan as opposed to a sort of preempting some of the already suggested witnesses.
Agreed. Agreed. Arnold, I owe you 2 minutes. Do we have...
You owe me 2 minutes.
Well, I did indicate, but we took it on an administrative issue. So make it powerful, Arnold. Do you want to...
Make it powerful?
Yeah, very short.
All right.
Most insightful question.
The most insightful question. All right, back to Mr. Wiggins there. Previous line of questioning, we were going after folks that are given a evacuation order. In some instances, they refuse to leave. They don't want to leave. In Australia, there seems to be a system where they can provide, a document saying, hey, we have this particular type of training, therefore we don't have to abide by the evacuation order. That was what we were getting at. And if you got a minute and a half to talk about people that want to stay in place rather than abide by evacuation order.
Yeah, sorry, not to go at length about the Australia programs and services there, but they pretty much have what they call the stay and defend or leave program, which is it's that cut and dry. Stick it out here or go, but go early. And that's probably something that we could learn from as that example, but the training that goes with it. But, if I can turn over to my colleagues at Finesse, because they work very closely with the evacuations in BC and maybe draw on some of their experiences and thoughts regarding the training and policies and self-direction.
Okay.
So with the emergency, the First Nations in BC activate their own emergency evacuation orders through council resolutions. So they also have the ability to stay if they choose to. It's the province that gives them the advice to leave based on the wildfire threat and risk. So just wanted to clarify that they can do that, but some of them kind of chose to suppress the fires as well. And I think it's important, like I mentioned, they have the training, the capacity and resources to stay and fight the fire. They just don't have the ability to under the current agreements. So this model in Australia, I think, would work out very well if First Nations in BC had that agreement with the province and the federal government under the proper certification, training, and capacity to be registered to fight those fires.
I think we've exceeded our official time, so we've had a robust conversation. Appreciate your participation. Meg Witch for coming out. We appreciate your insights. Meeting adjourned.